Great. Well, thanks for the intro, Hannah, and it's lovely to meet everybody here. It's Hannah kind of alluded to there. Will probably, I think, be a slightly different type of conversation today to the ones that you folks typically have. So, as Hannah mentioned, I'll give you a quick kind of intros to my kind of background, and then we'll start to kind of run through the different types of positions I recruit for, what we're expecting to see, and hopefully there'll be some useful information for you folk as to how you can kind of position yourselves moving forward to be in a great spot career wise and hopefully be ready for a really long and positive career within the privacy tech space. So yeah, very quickly, obviously George Ratcliffe. I've been in the recruitment space for almost a decade now. My journey to starting in privacy was, to be quite honest, almost a bit of an accident. So I worked for a big, actually American-centric business back in London for a long time, and
Sorry,
just
George,
after
to interrupt. Do you have slides? If so, we're not seeing them.
no,
No,
no
okay, just
slides.
okay. Okay, just wanted to confirm. Thank you,
No,
thank
no
you.
worries at all. Sorry, I should have clarified that at the start. But yeah, so it started with a major kind of company, predominantly doing regulatory compliance into banking. So not long after I joined, GDPR, I think probably fair to say, started to kind of take over, and there wasn't anybody recruiting in that space. So I took on that position, really enjoyed it, and everything just kind of snowballed from there, to be quite frank. And then fast forward about sort of until 4 or 5 years ago, and I was asked to move out here to the US to start Stott and May's privacy search team. So obviously made that move out. We're now a team of 4 people. So we do, to be frank, pretty much anything and everything within the data privacy space. But my personal focus is within privacy engineering, architecture, and technology. So we everything from kind of having worked with your major household names like a Nike or a Hewlett Packard through to really kind of genuine high growth companies like a Reddit or an OpenAI, are the types of organizations we work with on the tech side. Now, appreciate probably the majority of you at this stage maybe haven't worked with a recruiter before. So I'll quickly kind of run you through how we approach things and what we do on this side. Which again, hope will be helpful for all of you at some point. But the way that I view what we do is, to be honest, in the role of any kind of solid recruiter, is very straightforward. We're in our simplest form, a corporate matchmaker. So we're here to be a good listener, connector, and kind of middle person, both for you folks when you're looking for your next position, but also for the clients that we're working with and represent on that side. So we have to be in the middle, as it were, and make sure we really understand everything from what you think you're really good at, what you really enjoy, but also what you really want to do, not just now, but in 3 years, 5 years, and kind of 10 years. So at that point, obviously, when we understand those things, is when we can start to partner with you at whichever stage in your career you're at to help you kind of find the right opportunity. Now, one thing we do that's a little bit different at Stott and May is we do what's called a 360 model. So the same consultant, so that would be obviously me for the majority of you folk, would work with all of you as the candidate, but then also we would work really closely with the client on the other side. Whereas most companies tend to split things into candidate and client managers, we think it's really important, particularly within privacy technology, because it is such a nuanced space. And frankly, the kind of cultural pieces are really important as well. We think we have a big advantage by working with people on both sides so that we can help you, like we say, find the right fit technically, but also sort of on that softer side. And it's going to be the right environment for you to grow in over kind of the coming years. So that's quick kind of intros to kind of who I am and what we do. I'll start to kind of now walk through the way that I'm seeing the job market at the moment. And obviously we'll then move towards kind of the trends and pieces as well. So I have, I think, quite a different viewpoint on the privacy tech job market to a lot of people out there. I think traditionally a lot of people would say privacy technology is kind of split into the engineering side and the architecture side. So from my perspective, I think we actually probably go into about 5 or 6 different areas within those two. And I think making the distinction between is really important. Because the jobs are very different, even though they sometimes have the same role title, but also the skill sets required and the kind of approach to it is very different as well. So hopefully this is helpful for a lot of you when you're considering what you're going to go and do for your first or second jobs, to start to identify which ones could be a little bit more, could fit more with what you're really good at, but also what you really want to do. So first kind of piece. So for me and I think this is becoming a little bit more of a popular kind of topic. Certainly something I'm seeing more of or more conversation around on LinkedIn is that the privacy engineer role title. So for me, I think for me, the privacy engineer is three different role title or three different jobs. So we have what we kind of see as the privacy engineer, which is somebody that is typically reviewing a lot of code, reviewing a lot of products, and then working really closely with software engineering or product teams to advise them on privacy centric design and making sure that what they're building, whether it's a new application or some new hardware, that it is protecting consumer or user privacy. The second one I see is the privacy software engineer. So it's typically would involve a lot of the things that I just touched on with the first role, but actually for me, we then start to go into being a genuine software engineer. So actually building your own privacy preserving products, writing code that is being baked into products. And that can be anything from anonymization scripts right the way through to really kind of complex pieces like differential privacy, federated learning, those kind of areas, which I know that you folks obviously touch a lot on within your course. The final piece we see is that I call it a privacy research engineer, which sometimes does have that role title out there, but sometimes it is incorporated in the privacy engineer title that gets slapped on everything. So again, similar, and again, I know you folks are very big on the research side of things. These types of roles will also look at all things we've discussed in the above, but obviously also then we're looking at really kind of nuanced use cases for the different PETs, some of the ones I touched on earlier, but obviously that is a very broad space. Now, for me, what I think, yeah, it might seem like a bizarre piece to kind of really pick up on, but for me, why I think this is really important is yes, there are kind of like blurred lines between one of and the next of these roles, but to me, they are still very distinct positions. And at the moment, we do see, like I said, the same job title out there for all three different roles. So when you are starting to look out there, when you're starting to kind of consider what types of roles are going to be important for you, I'd always really kind of urge you to be obviously, of course, like looking at the job title, but also really diving into the responsibilities and seeing if the scope is broad enough for what you're looking to do, seeing if the types of things that you're looking at there will actually be the types of things that are going to get you really excited and stretch you enough over the coming years as you move forwards within whether it's that company or in any other kind of organization as well. So, yeah, I'll just finish on that point before I move on to the next section. Like I say, would be really encouraging everybody to be really vigilant on what the genuine responsibilities are of the role to make sure that is really aligned with your passions. Now, the second kind of two areas are not quite as kind of broad, but we're looking at privacy architecture and the technical side of program management. So for me, a privacy architect has matured. The role has matured quite extensively over the last few years to now being quite well aligned with what we would see on the security architecture side. So a lot of that kind of heavy lifting, looking extensively at data cleanliness, data quality, and data hygiene, but also, and the kind of privacy lens where it comes in here is obviously ensuring that a lot of the pipelines where data is being moved, that it making sure that the right rules are in place so that the right pieces of consumer data are only ending up in the places they should be, not in public cloud storage versus other areas, and those types of typical things. So I won't linger on this one for too long because I think it's probably a little bit more self-explanatory than some of the other pieces. And then that finally, the more recent one, and this is definitely a position we're starting to see become more popular with a lot of privacy engineering teams growing so extensively over the last few years, is the TPM role. So I think for me, the TPM role kind of does what it says in the tin in every sense, and that this person will be overseeing and overlooking a lot of the architecture, a lot of the engineering, but also within the privacy world. What we're seeing now is this person is becoming the kind of conduit, so the go-to person for non-privacy people whose products, whose tech, everything else is being impacted by what the privacy team is doing. This TPM person, like I say, is typically becoming that kind of go-to person. So for what's, I think, a relatively new position, it's starting to become very important very quickly. And if you are somebody that really loves to work with a very broad range of people, is a very good communicator, and really enjoys something genuinely different every day, this is definitely the type of position that could become a really natural kind of fit, and also is a really sort of visible position out there as well. Um, Awesome. Okay, great. So just moving into kind of the looser trends that we've seen over the last 18 months and also what we're expecting to see moving forwards. So I think the first kind of thing that has been really apparent over the last 12 to 18 months is we're seeing every kind of position, and this actually does extend beyond sort of the privacy technology side, but also into the operational spaces as well. Every position is becoming more technical at the moment. So whether we're looking at what traditionally would have been a privacy operations analyst, these people are now being expected to work with engineers. And then when we're looking at the more kind of technical side of things within the privacy engineering world, specifically for all of us here, people who are coming into the traditional roles where previously it would have just been reviewing a bit of code here or there and offering some advisory pieces. There is certainly now more of an expectation for those folks to start to be engaged in more technical work on a day-to-day basis. And that can be anything from basic kind of automation and scripting skills through to then understanding more use cases and more depth on PETs, how that can influence the program as a whole moving forwards. Alongside that, breadth is also definitely a big thing. And this isn't necessarily specific to privacy, but in a lot of areas at the moment, candidates, someone coming in, are typically being expected to cover a little bit more, not necessarily work more than they would have done previously, but we are starting to see companies expect them to cover slightly broader ranges of work so that you can be more adaptable, you can pick up different pieces. And that largely, I would say, is a result of the layoffs that we saw across the tech industry last year, but also more kind of what we're expecting to see moving forwards in the sense of companies wishing to be more agile and more adaptable should they need to pivot from one particular set of work priorities into another. Not having to completely change the workforce or reduce it and grow back up is a real advantage for folks at the moment. The final piece that we've seen here, and this I think is one that has been very apparent for a number of years now, it is the kind of communication side. So even in very technical roles, we're seeing one of the biggest kind of priorities for our clients, regardless of the shape, size, or industry, is somebody who can be a really effective communicator. So even when we're looking at the most technical privacy software engineering role, being able to sit down and work with people in legal, work with people in product and in more business focused roles, and being able to articulate why it's important that these parts of the organization follow and actually look to implement the pieces that you're bringing to the table is really, really important. So I would say I would be shocked if I think any of you on your interview journeys, when you do start to move into the workplace, didn't have a number of really kind of direct questions around this piece. So definitely something I would recommend to anybody, whether it's their first job search or even their ninth or 10th, is making sure you can have some really good examples. And particularly if it is your first role that you're going to be moving into, you don't necessarily, or obviously if you haven't got practical experience with that, that's absolutely fine. But just having examples of where you've dealt with or worked with a broad range of stakeholders and communicated with them, met them at their kind of level, really, really good thing to kind of have in your back pocket for any kind of situation like that. Now, in terms of kind of the predictions and what we're seeing moving forwards, I think the trends that I've just touched on, we're expecting to continue. The other kind of, I guess, really good bit of really positive industry prediction is, despite last year being a tougher space within the job market for privacy, as well as for most areas, we're definitely seeing things start to recover really positively at the moment. Now, we aren't seeing a huge dump of roles. We're not seeing companies coming out and looking to hire 9, 10, 11, 12 people at any one point in time. But what we are seeing is a very good portion of the clients that we've worked with for a long period of time, but also new clients being really interested in gradually increasing their headcount by 15% this year and then another 15% the year after. And we're definitely seeing long-term growth plans within privacy technology being put into place already, which for me is definitely really encouraging. And the level of growth that we're seeing to me appears to be very, very sustainable, as opposed to the very up and down growth and then obviously reduction in workforces we saw following COVID. So yeah, obviously the biggest industry and best industry prediction for all of us is the growth in this space. Now, the pieces I touched on earlier in terms of the technical areas, being able to offer a huge amount in terms of kind of like breadth and communication skills, again, are very much the kind of topics that we're hearing coming up with clients as to what's going to be their focus when hiring over the next 12 months. So those pieces, I think, when you're going out into those first interview processes, and we'll quite happily say as well, as and when you are going to do that individually, I'm more than happy to speak with people to help you prepare for that. But making sure that you have really good examples on those pieces will be putting you in a very strong position. I think the final kind of piece, which again I know links in with the majority of kind of work that you folks do within the course, is obviously the more understanding you can have on different PETs, what the kind of potential use cases are, and how to discuss them with a potential employer, then I genuinely think that's going to be putting you in a better and stronger position. Now, definitely not to say that everybody needs to be going into a research focused role or a really high end, very, very technical development role, but even in the positions that are still within privacy technology, but not as tech forward, having that understanding of how everything kind of fits together, again, is something we're expecting to be a really kind of common theme over the next 12 to 18 months, but also something that's just going to help you stand out for and within the workplace as well as within that interview process on the way in. Right. I'll pause a breath there. I appreciate that was a lot of information quite quickly, but I hope that's been a good kind of starting point. I'm just going to open up the chat now. So as and when people want to start kind of popping questions in to revisit any of those bits or anything completely unrelated, but within the privacy job space, more than happy to start running through that for everybody now. Okay, I just see one from Keanu. Um, what non-technical skills have you commonly seen in successful candidates? Great question. I think I think the most common one, and apologies that I'm going to touch on something that we've already touched that I've already spoken about a few times, but genuinely the kind of communication piece is probably one of the biggest ones. The second one is also drive to succeed. I think, again, being kind of transparent, one of the big parts of my role throughout an interview process is helping my candidates get prepared. So making sure they're going into an interview with all the information that they possibly could have that's going to help them stand out and help them be in the strongest position possible. Now, it does seem like a really kind of simple one, but I would genuinely say that the attitude that you bring, clearly like having a hiring manager leave with the impression that you really want to do well and that you're really driven to help them succeed by succeeding yourself, I would say is often at least 30 to 40% of kind of the scoring metrics, if you'd like to phrase it like that. Obviously, if you technically can't do the job, then it's going to be an uphill battle. But if you're kind of putting yourself in the position where you're a strong candidate technically, and the interviewer is leaving with the impression that you're going to work really hard, that you really want to be a focal point within this team, that you really want to grow and add value over a longer period of time, that is always going to put you in such a good position afterwards. If nothing else, I mean, occasionally over the 10 years I've done this, I have had candidates that weren't quite good enough technically for the role, but because they came across in such a strong fashion and they came across really like in a really strong manner to the hiring manager and left a really good impression. I've often had those candidates being referred for other jobs within the same company that are a better fit for them technically. So I always think it is very much a long game. Privacy is a small industry. So making sure you always leave a really positive impression is probably, I would say, one of the best bits of advice I could give to anybody who's setting out on an interview journey, even if it's outside of privacy. So, kind of, I hope that kind of touches on the points that you're after with your question. If you would like any more detail on that, then please feel free to pop a follow up in the chat or kind of jump in. Cool. Okay, we'll jump on now then. So Jin, okay, I'm just going to come to yours now. Great question. So I'll just read it out quickly for anyone who can't see it. So obviously I've mentioned the evolving requirements and qualities of privacy engineers, i.e. technical skills. Do you see this reflected in the hiring process, as in are more companies incorporating technical interviews for privacy engineers? Yes and no is the really unhelpful answer that I apologize for. We are starting to see more technical components to interview processes, but it looks a little bit different to what we probably would have seen 2, 3, 4 years ago. So the days of like an off the rack coder pad, excuse me, style test to just see obviously that's looking for exactly the right answers. We've not seen anything like that for a number of years now. And from my perspective, if a client is ever looking to incorporate a technical component within the interview process, we very heavily advise against going down that avenue of just, like I say, this off the rack test. What we do see, probably I would say 30 to 60% of the time at the moment, is like a technical solution style interview. So typically, what we see most of our clients when we have something like that is they will pop an architect and an engineer onto the call with you. They'll ask you to pull up Git or something similar, and they'll just provide you with a couple of live problems that typically are actually relevant to the work they're doing at that point in time. So it may be something from their code base, it may be something quite similar, and they'll ask you just to work through and find the bug and then kind of pull it back, or start something and solve a problem from relative scratch. Now, that I appreciate that may sound daunting. Why I actually really like it is because, and again, all of the clients I've worked with that do this, they aren't looking for the perfect answer. So even on the more technical roles, we aren't looking for somebody who's going to be like the best software engineer that Google have ever hired. So of course, we need you to be able to build prototypes and proofs of concepts, but we're still looking at a balancing act there. So as I said, all of the clients I work with there are typically looking for your ability to solve the problem, how you think about going about it, how you'll work through that and overcome some of the challenges there, rather than somebody who's providing like the perfect, most efficient line of code. I also really like it because it is relevant for the space that we're in, rather than just being, again, something off the rack, produce this piece of code that we're never going to use in Java, and they may not even be using that. So we're definitely seeing it, like I say, come about more. One bit of advice I would definitely give if you are going into an interview like that is that a lot of companies, they will typically try and test you. So they'll try and see the limit of your technical knowledge. So if you get to a question and you actually can't quite get to the end solution, I would definitely say, almost take like the athlete's mentality approach in that position. Forget about it, move on to the next piece and continue holding that air of confidence about you. Because the chances are, if that's the case, they are just looking to see what the limit of your ability is. They know that you're not going to be able to complete everything. They just want to see what you're able to produce and how you go about doing it. So, Gina, I hope that kind of starts to answer the question. Same thing. If you want to pop in any follow-ups, then please pop them into the bottom. But I'll quickly move on to Katrina's now. Uh, Yeah, great question, Katrina. Do you find yourself enticing individuals without privacy backgrounds to the space? If so, what are your usual arguments? So we do occasionally. It's obviously the preferred option for all of our clients is to be looking for somebody that has formal privacy experience. Now, whether that is from a course like the one that you folks are doing at CMU, or whether it's exposure in some sense, that's always going to be the preferred option. However, if we have like location constraints, so a client has to hire in what's potentially a smaller market, or they don't necessarily have the budget to bring on a fully fledged privacy engineer, then we would typically have to be a little bit more flexible in trying to find the right thing. So again, the same thing, I would always try to find somebody that has some exposure to a GDPR or CCPA project, and has the technical skills we're looking for. But if we can't find that, then we have to try and find the next best thing. So finding people who have the technical skills, are a good fit for the opportunity, but would need to learn a little bit on the privacy side, would be something that we do. Like I said, I would say that's not always super. It's not the top of our list of priorities. So if Christian, I mean, if you don't have that kind of formal privacy background, but you're looking to get into the space, then things like obviously independent learning, looking at some of the IAPP qualification, those types of things are a really good way to put yourself straight into that bracket then if you've got exposure to the privacy world, even if it's not necessarily directly doing that job previously. So again, I hope that kind of covers things there. Okay, so the next question, could you give a good example of communicating with a bored audience? one TPM and one privacy engineer hopefully will be helpful. Um, so just so I'm understanding that question, is this a board audience, as in like board level, that type of level of stakeholder?
Was it broad audience or broad? Yeah, a broad
Board
audience.
level. Okay, great. Yeah, no worries. That is a really good question. So oh, sorry, go for it. Okay, cool. I'll dive back in. So typically, I wouldn't say that we would regularly see somebody at an engineer or a TPM level communicating with people at like a board level, unless we are in a smaller, earlier stage company. What we typically would see was we would definitely see TPMs and senior privacy engineers engaging with people at kind of like a SVP or like at VP level. So still very senior, normally within a couple of levels of the board. But again, we probably wouldn't see that until you're getting to like let's say a head of privacy technology or a CPO kind of level of role. In terms of the types of communication, what sort of things you're looking at? So the best examples I would probably give are when we've got a new privacy preserving product. So it could be anything from, well, let's just go with something like an anonymization or de-identification script that is going into a product that is going to be launched to the users relatively soon. The the site challenges we have here are very, very similar to any kind of regulatory compliance or governance-based area. So typically, obviously, anybody on a product side or on the business side is looking to have their products run as quickly as possible without any issues. And compliance isn't always necessarily their first concern. Now, with the volume of fines and issues we've seen within the privacy world over the last 3, 4, 5 years, what we've typically seen is that a lot of these stakeholders are more open to and happy to be persuaded as to why they should be following, let's say, even a privacy policy, but right the way through to the more technical pieces, that script that is going to slow their product down. They just need to, I would describe it as that we can't make the horse drink from the water, but we can lead the horse to it. So a lot of those conversations that you'll be having in that situation is going to be sitting down with these stakeholders, running them through why it's important, running them through in some cases what the drawbacks would be for the overall company and what the risks are for the overall company if they don't kind of utilize what you're bringing, but then also helping them to see that in some instances, actually, like privacy can be a differentiator there, and hopefully down the line will help them and help the company grow. So those are the typical types of things that we would see. It's also, I guess, in non like privacy situations, also advising them on what they should be mindful of as well. So it is, I would say, stakeholder management in its most classic sense. And a sense where you're going to be like, relatively visible at still an early stage in your career, which is exciting. I appreciate it can be daunting sometimes. Best strategy to apply for a job. So there are a lot of different schools of thoughts on this. I would always recommend trying to be as personal as you can. So trying to reach the person who's hiring directly, whether that would be through me or another privacy recruiter, or reach them through a friend or an alumni from the CMU program, for me, is always going to put you in a much stronger position. I think so last week I was meeting with some clients at HP, and like within 25 minutes of putting up a brand new position, they had 200 applicants. They had to take the position down because there were just so many coming through. Now, obviously, the majority of those aren't people who are qualified for the role. They're people who will just apply online. But at the same time, and the point I guess I'm getting at is that when you apply via LinkedIn or through a careers site, it is still a bit of a lottery. You're relying on somebody who's reviewing the profiles, going through each and every one. You're then relying on them seeing the value in your background. And more often than not, the people like reviewing these applications are not privacy or engineering focused people. They will typically be people from a HR or a talent team. That's definitely not the case everywhere, and I wouldn't say don't apply online. But wherever you can, always trying to find that common ground, always trying to find a way where you immediately become relevant and can get that first conversation is always going to put you in a much stronger position throughout the application process, but also just making sure you get into the process, which is often the hardest piece. Cool. Nathan, so great question. Where do you see the attorney/slash legal side of privacy careers going as related to the more technical privacy engineer roles? Fantastic question. So another part of the team that I run at Stott and May, we do a lot of work both on in-house roles, but also hiring into private practice. So we are seeing a good amount of this at the moment. I think that the biggest piece is that any attorney for an in-house role, particularly at a tech company at the moment, exactly the reverse of what we were speaking about earlier. They almost have to be able to communicate with engineers. They have to have a strong background, or at least be able to show how they can do that and how they manage those relationships, which is a huge, huge thing. Now, any attorneys right now that genuinely can understand like how code and how those privacy preserving products are going to impact the organization at a higher level also is going to be in a really, really strong position career wise moving forwards. From a private practice side, obviously it's a slightly different industry to say the least. This last year has just been dominated by like breach response and by class action lawsuits. That, yeah, like I say, has taken up pretty much the whole of the time. I definitely see attorneys within, particularly within practices that work with tech clients quite a lot, needing to improve things on the communication side. And I think that's likely to be one of the bigger pieces. But I don't see over the next 12, 24 months, I still feel like the private practice industry is going to be dominated by class action lawsuits because there are just so many coming through at the moment. Pretty much every practice firm we've ever worked with is looking to hire quite extensively. So that's what I'd see. I'd say to try and guess exactly what direction that's going to go in more than kind of 24 months. If I'm honest, I don't have that information right now. I would expect that having that tech understanding will be an underriding kind of feeling for the industry, but it's probably a little early to tell on that one at the moment. So I hope that's answering the question for you there, Nathan. Okay, where do you see privacy engineering jobs with respect to newer fields slash venues like responsible AI or AI governance? Great question. Obviously a really, really hot topic at the moment. I don't know if anybody made it to the last IAPP conference in San Diego at the end of last year, but was honestly probably the main thing that everybody was talking about. I think at the moment, transparently, I still think it's a space that we don't really know too much about. Now they have the IAPP have kind of brought in some governance, sorry, so they brought in some training around AI governance, specifically from a privacy perspective, but they've only delivered it once. So I think we're still at a point where it's probably too soon to know exactly what direction it's going to go in. But it's definitely going to be a very, very big space. I mean, I would say that's probably going to be, well, is going to be one of the fastest growing areas with more and more companies hiring for like AI governance generalists all the time at the moment. So yeah, definitely if you can find an avenue to get into that side of things, it would be a very, very good place to be over time. Particularly again, as obviously it's just so new. So sorry, I can't actually see your names. It's the email address. So I apologize. I don't have more information for you on that. I expect by kind of like May, June time, after the next iteration of that training that the IAPP delivers, we'll probably start to see a little bit more on what that space is going to look like. And hopefully we'll have a better idea of what the careers, like kind of element to it will look like as well. Well, great question here. Relatively newer fields typically hire more experienced professionals to build the field. Do you see many privacy focused internships? So that's definitely becoming a space that we're seeing a lot of firms start to look for. Obviously, companies that don't have a privacy tech team already or don't have the people there to help you train and develop, I would struggle to see them ever making sense of bringing in interns. However, there are a number of companies out there, like larger companies that I've worked with, some that I haven't, that are starting to look at internships. And particularly obviously for people who've done a master's program and have actually been around a little bit longer, have more experience in that space. I think it's an industry, sorry, I think it's a type of role that we will see grow because it's challenging to hire really good privacy engineers. So being able to come to this space and hire people straight out of school, straight out of programs like the one at CMU is definitely going to be a positive thing for companies moving forward. So what I would suggest with regards to looking for things like that is LinkedIn is going to be the best place to find those. So making sure you're kind of connecting with a lot of privacy, technology, and engineering leaders on LinkedIn, so you can see when they're posting things like that, or also if they're reposting ones that other people have kind of put out there, is going to be the best way to find things like that. But yeah, as I said, certainly one we're seeing come up more regularly than we did last year or the year before, which was great. So yeah, hopefully that will continue to be a growing space. Awesome. Okay. Can you comment on the space of privacy-focused startups and their hiring needs? Yeah, definitely. I love that question, Hannah. So this is definitely a little bit more of a unique one. So typically, obviously, we call them like product focused startups. So the majority and the bulk of their hiring in the early stages is typically going to be dominated by people who are going to build the product, by people who are going to sell the product for the most part, which is the same in any sort of industry that we work on. Typically privacy is a little different to say security or other industries like that, because quite often the founders have come from a privacy background. So a lot of the very early stage work, they will kind of form an idea of the product and things of that kind of nature. Whereas in security, we typically see people who come from engineering roles who then need security people to help them on build the kind of subject matter, build the controls and everything else. Now, that being said, that we are definitely starting to see a little bit more hiring on this side. So definitely firms who are looking to create more advanced products, rather than the slightly more generic kind of data discovery or DSAR requests, sort of operational tools. Now we're starting to see tools that are venturing into genuine like privacy enhancing technology and selling that as a solution. As those companies mature, I definitely anticipate that we will see more from like an applied research type role. And you don't necessarily need a PhD to step into something like that, but having a very strong background and having proven kind of work in, I mean, differential privacy is likely to be the biggest one to start with. I then expect privacy preserving machine learning will also be a very big piece. So being able to be in a position where you can go into that organization, you can research the use cases for those technologies, and then you can build a prototype for what that's going to look like that can go into the end product, is definitely going to be a really interesting space to be in. And it's definitely going to grow. I don't think it will grow at quite the same pace we would see what I'd call like an in-house role with a larger tech company just yet. It certainly feels like we're still a little bit of time off that. But as soon as we start to see venture capital firms funding early stage firms again, then I expect that we will see that space start to grow a little bit more. So mid to late this year would definitely be a good time to start to explore that space and start to see what you can find out there. Okay. No problem, Hannah. Okay, Bryce, just coming to yours now. A few moments ago, you mentioned a hypothetical head of privacy technology type role. How do you see privacy engineering leadership roles evolving and penetrating outside of big tech and privacy product companies as the field becomes more mainstream? Fantastic question. I think a big thing for me at the moment, Bryce, I would say that so when I started this practice of Stott and May 4 years ago, purely work with technology companies. The entire business, Stott and May, that I work within, even in our other disciplines, we've always worked solely with purely kind of tech focused companies. Over the last couple of years, and privacy and security have probably been the two areas that have driven this the most. We've become more apparent doing work we call it like kind of tech adjacent. So Nike would be a prime example. They're almost like an accidental tech company. And there are a lot of examples out there in a lot of different industries where companies that were selling apparel, or even like the automotive industry is a great example. 30 years ago, a car was a mechanical engineering piece, whereas now it's as much software as it is that hardware and actually automotive engineering as well. So from our perspective, those industries are definitely a little slower, but we are starting to see big privacy tech focused roles. So obviously everything under the umbrella that we've spoken about today. So pure engineering through to architecture and everything else. We're starting to see more and more of these roles crop up at these tech adjacent companies. So Ford, for example. Ford have been looking to hire people from a technical privacy perspective for the last 12, 18 months. We're starting to see those types of roles crop up at GM and other places like that as well. So for me, it is going to be in companies that are genuinely just not tech facing at all. It's probably going to take quite a while. But in tech adjacent industries, we will continue to see that grow. I expect at a fairly steady rate over the next 12, 18, 24 months. I do think that kind of sadly, the big thing that's going to drive that in each individual industry is unfortunately probably going to be a massive fine. So when we see a big fine come through from an automotive firm or somebody of within a subset of an industry, that's when we will start to see things grow really aggressively and see those companies really start to invest in building a 30, 40, 50 person team as opposed to a 5 to 10 person team. But I mean, the great thing that I'll kind of finish this one on is that a 5 or a 10 person team in a lot of companies like that, like that's all of a sudden that is growing the footprint of privacy engineering and technology quite significantly, even though they might not sound like big numbers. Outside of big tech, there isn't a huge amount there just yet. So the automotive industry coming to the front, that probably adds like between 5 to 10% of what we see on the entire job market for privacy technologists right now, almost straight away. So yeah, it's definitely a very promising and exciting time to be in the industry.
Any other questions that we would like to ask? Thank you, George. I think we all learned a lot from your insights today, and we appreciate you joining us. Yeah, and if you do have any roles that we could help advertise within our program, please do forward them. We'd be happy to disseminate them to
Mhm.
our network as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, and yeah, I think seems like we've addressed the questions here in the room at least. But if there's anyone who would like a follow up, would it be okay if I shared your email address?
Absolutely. Yeah. If there's anything I can help with, then please feel free to reach out. And yeah, more than happy to help out any way I can.
All right, thank you so much, and hope to do the session again in the future.